Open your phone in 2025, type 3 words into the search bar, IRS relief payment, and watch what happens. The suggestions fill in before you even finish. IRS relief payment 2025. Next stimulus check date, new IRS payment update. Scroll through social media and it's the same pattern. Videos promising hidden programs. Creators telling you how to claim your solid $200. Thumbnails with checks, fireworks, and the words free money in all caps. Meanwhile, if you go to the IRS website itself, there's no new stimulus, no universal relief check. Just dry paragraphs about tax extensions for natural disasters, explanations of existing credits, and deadline updates. But that's not what people want to hear. They don't want the footnotes. They want the feeling. They want the story that somewhere, somehow, there's still a check in the mail with their name on it. Here's the uncomfortable rule history keeps whispering. Every empire promises free money before it breaks. Not at the beginning, not in its prime, at the end. Right when the math stops working, when the system can't deliver what it used to, the same script appears. People stop believing the future will take care of them, and the empire responds with one last wave of promises. Sometimes it's bread, sometimes it's welfare, sometimes it's a small tax rebate. Sometimes it's a flood of stimulus checks. The packaging changes, the logic behind it doesn't. You're told these policies are compassion, stability, fairness, help for the middle class. But underneath all the messaging, something else is going on. When an empire runs out of real growth, it doesn't shrink its promises. It sweetens them with money borrowed from the future. Early in the cycle, free money is a reward. Late in the cycle, free money is morphine. To see that clearly, we have to get out of 2025 for a moment. We have to step into a time machine and watch the pattern unfold in places that once thought they were as permanent as you think your system is today. Rome, the British Empire, the United States in 2008, the United States in 2020. Different centuries, different languages, same addiction. Let's go back to where the phrase free bread was not a metaphor, but a policy. Imagine walking into Rome at its height. Monuments, markets, crowds, the smell of cooked grain and olives. On the surface, it looks like a civilization that solved the problem of scarcity. Citizens in the capital can show up and receive grain at little or no cost, food provided by the state. To the people standing in line, it doesn't feel like a macroeconomic strategy. It feels like security. It feels like the government cares. In the beginning, there's a logic to it. Rome conquers territories, collects tribute, and drags home wealth. The empire can fund grain distributions and public games off the back of expansion. The bread and circuses are paid for with real plunder, real taxes, real resources. But once you start buying social peace, it's very hard to stop. Politicians learn that the surest way to win favor is to promise more. More grain, more entertainment, more benefits. Citizens learn that part of being Roman now includes a share of free food, free spectacle, free comfort. Over time, the empire's obligations harden. The expectation becomes a right. Taking it away isn't just unpopular, it's dangerous. Then the world shifts. Conquests slow, wars get more expensive, armies need to be paid more to stay loyal. Frontiers grow harder to defend. Rome's cost structure explodes while its easy sources of new wealth shrink. But one thing doesn't shrink: the political need to keep the masses calm. So the grain keeps flowing. The games go on. The free benefits continue. Where does the money come from when expansion no longer covers the bill? From the oldest trick in the imperial playbook, you cheat the money. At first, it's almost invisible. The silver coin, the denarius, is shaved ever so slightly, its purity reduced a touch. The state mints more coins from the same amount of metal. It tells everyone nothing has changed, but something has. Each time Rome chooses not to confront its real limits, it chooses to dilute them instead. A bit more debasement, a bit more hidden inflation, a bit more pressure pushed quietly onto savers and workers. The people in the breadline still get their grain, they still get their games. On paper, the promise is kept. In reality, the cost has been shifted onto the value of the currency in their hands. Free bread wasn't free. It was an end-stage subsidy funded by draining the life out of Rome's money. The empire refused to say, "We can't give you what we used to." So it said, "We'll keep giving it to you," and made the coin pay the price. That's the first version of the pattern. Now move the time machine forward to the 20th century and shift the scene to Britain. For over 100 years, the British pound is the king of money. The empire stretches across continents. Trade, finance, and insurance all orbit around London and its currency. Then 2 world wars smash into the ledger. Britain wins both conflicts politically and militarily. Economically, it's a different story. The country is exhausted. Much of its industrial base is damaged. It's heavily indebted to its younger, richer ally, the United States. At this moment, Britain faces a brutal choice. It can admit that its days as an imperial superpower are over, scale back its ambitions, and ask its citizens to live with less. Or it can try to keep the emotional promises of empire alive, even as the financial foundation crumbles. It chooses the second path. In the post-war years, Britain builds something noble: the modern welfare state, free healthcare under the National Health Service, expanded social security, housing support, a safety net that would have sounded utopian by earlier standards. The intent is humane. It feels like progress. For millions of people, life genuinely improves, but there is a structural problem lurking underneath. The country no longer has an empire's income, yet it is setting up an empire-sized set of guarantees. It costs money to maintain troops overseas. It costs money to subsidize industries that can't compete like they once did. It costs a lot of money to run a cradle-to-grave welfare system in a world where your share of global trade is shrinking. Reducing those promises becomes politically toxic, almost impossible. So Britain does what late-stage systems do. It borrows, inflates, and hopes growth will catch up. It doesn't. The pound is devalued again and again. Behind every polite phrase, adjusting the rate, managing competitiveness, is the same reality. The country can't reconcile its promises with its productivity. Free healthcare, free services, free support. They're not truly free. They are funded by a currency steadily stepping down from its old throne. To the average citizen filling out a benefits form, it doesn't feel like the end of an era. It feels like the system doing what it's supposed to do. To the monetary system, it looks like a familiar story, a nation trying to maintain first-place benefits on a second-place balance sheet. Rome had its bread and games, Britain had its welfare empire. The details changed, the pattern did not. Now let's cross the Atlantic and skip ahead to a year that still feels close. 2008. You know what that looked like? Headlines about collapsing banks, frozen credit markets, foreclosures, long lines outside failed institutions, retirement accounts melting away on live TV. For years preceding that moment, the system told people the same thing. Borrow, buy, leverage, housing prices always go up, risk is contained, the system is safe. Then suddenly, it wasn't. When the housing bubble burst, it didn't just take down over-leveraged homeowners, it threatened the plumbing of the entire financial world. At that edge, policymakers had 2 broad directions. Direction 1, take the pain up front. Let bad debts clear. Allow overbuilt sectors to shrink. Admit that the previous level of apparent prosperity was built on leverage and must correct. Direction 2, soften the blow. Borrow more, cut rates, inject money, and send a visible gesture to households that help is on the way. You know which direction they chose. In 2008, the United States passed the Economic Stimulus Act. Among other things, it mailed out tax rebate checks, hundreds of dollars per person, to tens of millions of Americans. It wasn't huge money on an individual level, $300, $600, maybe a bit more depending on your situation. Enough to help, not enough to transform your life. But symbolically, it was everything. It said, we see you. Here's cash. We're shooting adrenaline into the economy. We're not going to let it all fall apart. For many, that check was real relief. Bills got paid, groceries were bought, a little breathing room appeared. But look at the scale mismatch. On the front end, a few $100s in the mailbox. On the back end, trillions in new commitments, emergency lending facilities, asset purchases, bailouts, and guarantees baked into the system. The gesture of free money was the morphine you could feel. The real cost was pain moved into the future through more debt, more central bank intervention, more dependence on constantly supportive policy. The structure was not truly repaired, it was sedated. It's not that the rebate was evil or that it helped no one, it's that it fit the late cycle pattern perfectly, buying time with checks while deeper issues were patched with leverage. Now jump just 12 years ahead to 2020. Global pandemic, lockdowns, streets empty, planes parked, whole sectors of the economy turned off like a light switch. Within weeks, millions of people go from a paycheck to nothing. Restaurants close, offices shutter. The flow of daily commerce is interrupted in a way no modern central banker or treasury official has ever had to deal with. Once again, there is a fork in the road. Do you allow incomes to fall and businesses to fail at a scale that might reset the system but cause immediate, unbearable pain? Or do you push a button and unleash money on a scale no prior generation has ever seen? The answer comes fast. Stimulus checks go out, multiple rounds, enhanced unemployment benefits, programs to cover payrolls, loans to companies, backstops for markets. Trillions of dollars created and distributed in a matter of months. For many people, this is not abstract. For the first time in their lives, they are paid to stay home. Their bank account rises while their work hours fall. Sometimes the checks add up to more than they used to make. On the surface, it feels like a compassionate miracle. In some cases, it is literally the difference between making rent and not, between keeping a small business alive for a few more months or shutting the door forever. But at the level of the empire, something else is happening. It just learned that you can shut down huge parts of the real economy and keep the illusion of stability alive by turning a monetary fire hose on full. You can call it stimulus, relief, rescue. You can say, we had no choice. And there's some truth in that. But you have also crossed a line. You have conditioned a society to believe that when something truly bad happens, they won't be asked to endure a lower standard of living. They will be sent money. The next time pain appears, the expectation is already wired in. That is the essence of late-stage free money, not a one-off response, but a habit. It doesn't end with the last check. It ends when the system can no longer print away the consequences without breaking its own currency. Which brings us back to where we started. 2025, a phone and 3 words in a search bar. IRS relief payment. There is no major new stimulus program signed into law. There is no universal COVID-style check being printed. The IRS communication is largely about tax relief in disaster zones, filing deadlines, payment plans, and credits that have existed in some form for years. But in the collective mind, something else is going on. You have millions of people whose wages have not kept up with housing, with healthcare, with food, with the general cost of existing. You have households carrying record levels of credit card debt at interest rates they never imagined. You have a generation that saw stimulus checks once and cannot forget the feeling, so they search, they click, they watch videos that promise hidden benefits and new relief. They share clips explaining how to get your 2025 IRS check, whether or not such a check actually exists. The stimulus has become a meme. The idea of free money is almost as powerful as the money itself. Because at the end of a cycle, people shift from expecting opportunity to expecting relief, from saying, how do I get ahead, to saying, surely there's another program coming. Rome's crowd waited in the forum for grain and games. British citizens came to expect welfare as part of the social contract. American households in 2008 and 2020 came to expect that when things get really bad, the government will not just change interest rates in some distant market, it will put cash directly into their hands. Now you are watching the next phase, a population searching for checks that don't exist yet, hoping there is still one more free shot left in the syringe. That is what the late stage looks like. It's not just the policies, it's the psychology. So here's the blueprint when you strip the details away. First, an empire rises on effort, on building, on production that is hard, messy, and real. The rewards of that effort are strong money, rising living standards, and a sense that the future will be better because you are growing into it. Then, comfort arrives. The system discovers that it can ease certain pains with benefits, subsidies, and guarantees. At first, these are limited, modest, and sustainable. They are funded by genuine surplus. Over time, the boundary moves. More programs, more support, more expectations. The line between a safety net and a hammock begins to blur. The political cost of reducing anything becomes unbearable. Every benefit is permanent. Every voter group is entitled. Meanwhile, growth slows, debt accumulates. The easy gains from conquest, globalization, or financial engineering fade. But the promises do not fade. So the empire reaches for the only tool left that can reconcile unlimited promises with limited resources. It prints, borrows, and debases, and it sends out money, visible, tangible, and immediate, to keep people from feeling the full weight of the adjustment. Early in the cycle, free money is a bonus. In the middle, it's a stabilizer. At the end, it's an anesthetic. It doesn't fix the broken bone. It just numbs the pain while the fracture spreads. That is the stage where Rome found itself when bread and circuses were non-negotiable and coins were worthless. That is where Britain found itself when it tried to maintain imperial-scale services with post-imperial finances. That is where America brushed up against in 2008 and then leaned into fully in 2020 when trillions were deployed not as rare exceptions, but as the new normal response to crisis. And that is the backdrop to every IRS relief payment search bar in 2025. So what does this mean for you? It doesn't mean every benefit is bad. It doesn't mean every relief program is evil. It means that when a society becomes dependent on government checks, real or imagined, to feel stable, you are no longer in the confident middle of the cycle. You are much closer to the phase where history starts whispering warnings. Because there's one more piece of the pattern we haven't said out loud. The free money at the end is never actually free. It is paid for with lost purchasing power, with currency that buys less, with inflation that eats savings, with debts that can only be honored on paper, not in reality. It is paid for by someone, somewhere, sometime. Rome's free bread was paid for by citizens holding debased coins. Britain's welfare empire was paid for by holders of a steadily weakened pound. America's stimulus waves are being paid for, slowly and quietly, by anyone whose income can't keep up with the rising price of simply being alive. Every empire promises free money before it breaks, not because its leaders are uniquely malicious, but because at the end they run out of politically possible options. Telling people the truth, that the system has limits, that living standards may have to reset, that not every promise can be kept, is the one thing late-stage elites almost never do. So instead, they do what works in the short term. They soothe, they relieve, they promise, they send checks. In the moment, it feels like mercy. On the chart of history, it looks like a warning label. So the question is not, will there be another check? The question is, if your economy now needs constant help, constant relief, and constant promises from the state just to feel normal, are you living in a healthy system, or in a cycle that's buying time with borrowed comfort on the edge of something it can't admit? Every empire believes it can be the first one to break this pattern. So far, history disagrees.